Hello, and welcome to another Northstar Talks Politics. Now, I started off wanting very much to rant about, for those of you who've been following my other videos or my Let's Play series, the injustices of the way the Social Security Disability Insurance system is applied in the United States and how that relates to bureaucracy and power structures. Things have somewhat evolved, and there's topics for discussion. First of all, this is an excellent, what I like to call a teachable moment. Starting with symbolic violence. The generative AI definition is actually a fairly good one in this case. Sometimes it's garbage. Sometimes this generative AI stuff is wildly inaccurate. But in this case, it's pretty good. Symbolic violence, a concept introduced by sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, refers to subtle and often unconscious ways in which dominant groups impose their norms and values on subordinate groups, perpetuating social inequalities. Symbolic violence is the non-physical imposition of dominant cultural norms, ideas, and values on support groups, often through subconscious means, leading to acceptance of status quo and the perpetuation of social inequalities. That's the key thing. The AI thing doesn't lean heavily on this point enough. The perpetuation of social inequalities is absolutely key to this. How it works: normalization. Symbolic violence works by normalizing the dominant group's way of seeing, thinking, and talking, making them seem natural and legitimate. And internalization. Support groups often internalize these dominant norms, leading them to accept their own subjugation and to reproduce the existing social structures. There's examples of gender, class, race, and education. This is the nonsense liberal idea of class, of upper middle, lower class, instead of, say, a Marxist understanding where you have proletariat, bourgeois, petty bourgeois, labor aristocracy. Um, there's different definitions of class. This is also a generative AI thing, after all. This article from an actual human, as far as I can tell, is a little better. Pierre Bourdieu, though less succinct. Pierre Bourdieu, a renowned French sociologist, introduced the concept of symbolic violence as a means to understand the power dynamics and social inequalities exist within society. Symbolic violence refers to subtle and often unnoticed forms of domination and control that are exerted through social norms, values, and cultural practices. This concept provides a valuable framework for analyzing how social structures and institutions perpetuate inequality and maintain the status quo. Understanding symbolic violence. The nature of symbolic violence operates through manipulation of symbols, hence symbolic, ideas, and beliefs rather than through physical force. It is a form of power that functions at the level of culture, shaping individuals' perceptions, preferences, and behaviors. Bourdieu argued that symbolic violence is particularly effective because it is often internalized by individuals, leading to accept and reproduce. That's carry forward to push on others, etc. The social hierarchies and inequalities exist. Internalization, acceptance. One of the critical aspects of symbolic violence, actually, I'll scroll up in case some of you start reading that top part. One of the critical aspects of symbolic violence is its ability to be internalized by those who experience it. The internalization means that individuals come to see the existing social order as natural and inevitable. They accept their place within the hierarchy, often without questioning the legitimacy of the system. This acceptance is facilitated by the socialization process, where individuals learn and absorb the dominant values and norms of society from an early age. Central to Bourdieu's theory is the concept of habitus, which refers to deeply ingrained habits, skills, and dispositions that individuals acquire through their life experiences. The habitus is shaped by an individual's social background and conditions. Social background and conditions, not their background conditions, it conditions their perceptions and actions. Through the habitus, symbolic violence operates at a subconscious level, influencing how individuals perceive the world and their place within it. This goes down to cultural capital, its imposition. I'll leave this up for those still reading. this intimately relates to systems of bureaucracy, to systems of hierarchy and power. I attempted to refer to this before, but without these definitions, without these articles, I think some of you may have thought I was pulling stuff out of nowhere or not understood what I was referring to. So this time I have some definitions and articles for you. Um, I, of course, as someone who's disabled with long COVID now, face a great deal of symbolic violence because symbolic violence is, generally speaking, directed downwards against racial minorities, against gender minorities, sexual orientation minorities, uh, the disabled, which applies to me, class structures, those who have lesser economic means. I grew up with lesser economic means, disabled. There's also sexual orientation minority aspect here. So have faced throughout my life multiple forms of symbolic violence, and with becoming disabled long COVID, it's worse. But um, and this is as a male and one who presents as cisgender and is within what my sexual orientation is includes attraction to women. So I'm someone who has faced less of this than, say, gay individuals. I'm bisexual, I guess, is just out there. Um, and so I have an easier time blending in and not facing open discrimination, but the symbolic violence doesn't go without notice. There's still cultural norms and things that people say without realizing they're doing harm. And the way that media is controlling these things that and structures and hierarchies that still trickle down into hurting individuals such as myself. And now I reach a point where after a lifetime of hard work, after doing all things right, I've been screwed. I've been screwed because I'm disabled, and for instance, with the SSDI system, I've now, after dealing with a uncooperative, hostile local bureaucrat, managed to reach a federal level bureaucrat at the Social Security Administration. So instead of the local office, the federal office on the phone. Finally, it was supposed to be a 90-minute wait, and it was over 2.5 hours before I got called back, but I eventually got one this time. Um, and found someone who was helpful for a change, which is nice, and not hostile and willing to work with my difficulty understanding the things sometimes the first time I hear it because of my difficulty focusing and processing information with long COVID because it affects cognition. And it seems I've been screwed by of some of the employers, even though I at first glance have earned enough money to be eligible for SSDI. Some number of my employers were not paying into Social Security. It seems they were paying me. They were not paying into Social Security. They didn't tell me they weren't paying into Social Security, so I had no way of knowing. As a 20-something-year-old, I was not going to be carefully thrifting through paychecks and new hire forms and stuff to notice that someone was paying into my taxes. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna look as far as, okay, there's state and federal taxes. Maybe there's a line for, Medicare or something. I'm not gonna notice, hey, there's no SSDI entry on this paycheck, which often the things are abbreviated, so even if they're paying, it's not visible. That's a problem. I'm not going to notice that. And these are some of the lowest paid jobs I worked, so they screwed me over. They were paying minimum wage, and the reason they were doing this is because if they pay into Social Security, the employer has to pay a matching percentage of the employee. So it allows them to effectively pay people less. And they were already paying as little as they could, minimum wage. So they were doing everything they could to screw their employers, to exploit them. Not that the labor wasn't worth 2, 3, 4 times as much to them as they were paying, but to obtain the maximum profit their employees. These employers were not paying into Social Security for me, it seems. And I got screwed. I had no idea. I came just a little bit short of the SSDI credits I need, which if I had been disabled at a later age, because it was disabled 31, that's when it hits 20 work credits for SSDI, if I'd been disabled up to 42, it would have still been 20 work credits. So if I'd been disabled a little later, almost certainly even at the same kind of percentage of jobs paying in, would have been qualified. In fact, as you get older, you tend to work better jobs that pay better. The next job I would have been working out of grad school, if I could have finished that instead of being long COVID, would have almost certainly been working like Pfizer or something. And I would have definitely, within 6 months, I would have hit that 20 credits. It was 18 credits, got disabled at 31. If I got disabled before I went to grad school, because there's no credit you get for going to grad school. There's no credit you get for unpaid research work in grad school. There's no credit you get paid for all the volunteering I did, obviously, whether that's in hospitals or Habitat for Humanity or anything, or soup kitchens, which is a necessary part of making it to med school. And it has become, I don't mean this is something, some people, I mean, you pretty much, if you want to get into med school, you have to do this. So doing everything right, working very hard, working fewer hours. So sometimes part-time work I could have been doing full-time, so I had time to study for the MCAT, which is a test you have to take to get to med school. That alone, in some cases, could have made the difference between qualifying or not qualifying. I get screwed. And then, of course, I went to a local bureaucrat who lied to me about the appeals process. So apparently, you can appeal multiple times, and eventually, on like the third or fourth round, you get to a judge. Maybe a judge could show some discretion to help me. More likely, the judges around here are elitist and will look down on me unless I'm very careful to explain that I have like a million impressive credentials to my name. I've worked very hard. I got screwed by being ambitious and trying to become a physician. I was close, and this was just the wrong time in my life to get disabled. And hope they can show some discretion to, in some way, overrule the rules as right, and especially when it's an employer screwing me over, not tell me they're not paying SSDI. Because if an employer ever told me they weren't paying in, I would have objected. I would have said, damn it, pay in. It's only like a little bit. If you won't pay the money, I'll give you the money. Just, I'm not going to be penny wise, dollar stupid like that. I would have gladly paid in, even if I had to pay the full contribution amount. Especially when I ended up so close to having the right amount. And, I wouldn't have wanted to get in a situation where I paid in money and I don't get any benefit just because I'm couple credits short, work credits short, with only 2 credits short because of rounding down. There are years where I would half credit here, half credit there. Only through the rounding am I even short. And on top of that, and through the cap that you can't earn more for a year. So I earned enough. It's just when I earned the credits, when I got disabled, and employers who screwed me with not paying the disability insurance. And all of these things fucked me over. And symbolic violence would say, would encourage me, this is how this works, encourage you to blame yourself. It would encourage people at me to say, oh, I just didn't work hard enough or something, even though I worked as hard as I possibly could. Sometimes I worked 2 jobs at once, which is part of why I didn't have time to carefully look at every pay stub, because I was working multiple jobs and studying for the MCAT and volunteering in a hospital and dealing with some abusive roommates, because when you have like 4 roommates and you're living in a slum, you can get some nasty people, your roommates. But that's the only way I could live within my means at the time and save up money to relocate myself to a big city where there were jobs in my field, because family did not help me move to a big city where there were jobs in my field. And I knew I couldn't stay in a rural area doing shit jobs forever and still ever get, I knew I would be trapped there. So I was saving up money while making minimum wage. It's hard to do, to save thousands and thousands of dollars making minimum wage and find time to study for them cat. Something's going to give, and that can easily be missing that someone's screwing you on a paycheck of multiple jobs you're working. I did nothing wrong. I got fucked. I did my share in a sense of what I contribute to society. I contributed more than many people who would qualify. Just based on maybe they didn't have their credits ran down based on the particular years they worked, or they didn't hit the cap some years where I went well over the 4-credit cap, and if there was no cap, I could have earned 8 credits, 9, 10 in a certain year. Well, I mean, like more than 10. The rates, I could have earned like 20 credits a single year if there wasn't a 4-credit cap in certain years. If I'm earning 35,000 and it's 1,500 a credit, that's like 20 credits in just one year. You see that obviously, where someone else who earned just enough to earn 4 credits a year. The point is, people who almost certainly worked less than me. And while there are also people who worked more than me, I was in grad school. I was not getting credit for that. I did my part, and I got screwed. And I refuse to internalize to blame myself for a system that screwed me, because this is the violence within the system. This is capitalism. This is, to quote a nursery rhyme, which is based on this poem by Joe Carney, but this is not the poem is written. Little drops of water, little grains of sand. This make the milkman richer and the baker grand. That's the nursery rhyme, which is based on this poem, but you can see these are different words here. It refers to the way people get screwed. Bakers adding sand to their flour when they bake bread. Milkmen adding water to the milk to water it down. It's an appropriate nursery rhyme or poem or quote. I could not find the original. Somewhere there's a version with the nursery rhyme, little with the sand and the water part. But although that poem does itself get to the message of being led from this path of virtue and talking, so it's in the same theme as that original poem. The system works to nickel and dime and screw people at the bottom, and then we're encouraged to believe, if we're right leaning, oh, it's the liberals, or if we're left leaning, oh, it's the conservatives. No, it's capitalism. This is what capitalism does to people, and this is what we will be burdened with as long as we're stuck with capitalism. So, listeners, if you're listening and you've got enough of a mind to realize capitalism is a problem here, to do more reading and to come to that conclusion, never stop resisting. The system is becoming, if you watched Andor, it talks about, there's a character in the show. I really like the show. I've just finished the first scene. It talks about the empire's power reaching a point where we'll never be able to displace it. Do something before it's too late. We are reaching the point where capitalism and the U.S. empire is becoming so powerful that it can never be replaced, never be overthrown. Even if it gets to the point where people rebel someday, it's doomed to failure. Resist. In this case, peaceful protest, disruption, civil disobedience. I cannot tell you to do anything more than that. It would be illegal, and I am not in a position to judge whether those things are necessary or not. So I am not endorsing those things, but I'm not endorsing going beyond legal means. But resist however you can. There's a million legal ways to throw a monkey wrench in the system and to point out this system is corrupt. It's evil. It must be opposed. It is killing and murdering and grinding up human beings in a figurative sense. The war is in a much more literal getting exploded sense. And it can turn the best intentions sour. The United States started off as the good guys, sort of, around World War II, FDR. We had already done some coups in Latin America, so I do not pretend that the U.S. and the genocide of the Native Americans and slavery. The U.S. was by no means untainted, but there was still a thriving element of trying to push for greater equality in the country at the time. And then FDR was getting sick. Democratic Party elites pushed Truman as the vice president, even though Truman was not the person who had been vice president before 44, and that guy who had been FDR's Secretary of Agriculture before he became vice president was the pick of FDR, was by far the favorite among the Democratic voter base. But using the fact there was a war going on at the time, there were U.S. troops in Normandy, people were distracted. The party elites pulled a fast one. If you don't know the figure of speech, pulled a trick, a nasty trick on the American people. Got Truman in, who was much more conservative than the person who should have been the vice president. Truman, of course, went about announcing the Truman Doctrine, starting the Cold War. And where does this lead to the U.S.? Where does that help justify a crackdown, the Second Red Scare, and a crackdown on socialists, and a mass arrest of communists and such forth that led to McCarthyism? It led to an unconstrained power of capitalism and the U.S. attaching itself as if the U.S. was capitalist rather than a democracy primarily. And what did this lead to? It led to the U.S. going from condemning the Bengal famine, which was a genocide carried out by the British, and the Iranian famine genocide the British also carried out, from being a country that at least signaled protest these things and tried to work through diplomatic channels to stop them, to a country that did the Bangladeshi genocide, to a country that did the Indonesian genocide. Both their puppet regimes, I'm not saying U.S. troops did these, but the Pakistani puppet regime, the Indonesian puppet regime, these were both far right puppet regimes, like fascist, pseudo-fascist, CIA-installed dictators, funded by the U.S., protected from diplomatic consequences of actions by the U.S., given military and economic aid to prop up their regimes. The U.S. was involved in turning a blind eye to the East Timor genocide, carried out by the same regime that did the Indonesian genocide. It's been involved in modern times in the East Congolese genocide, the Gaza genocide, and attempted to carry out a genocide in Yemen, which the scale of death, it could be considered a failed genocide, but could be considered a successful one depending on how you qualify it. It is still a horrendous atrocity. Now the U.S. is bombing Yemen again, and maybe it's going to cut off food to the area again, which, a second try at genocide with the Saudis. Maybe that'll be what comes of this, or maybe the Saudis will keep out this time and the U.S. can't cut off food there without their help, because land routes. This is where unconstrained abuse of power, this is where this kind of injustice, and this is where capitalism leads us, and it's going to get worse. The U.S., many people are aware, is sliding into tyranny, into fascism. People overuse the term fascism, and they don't even understand what it means. Trump is not a Hitler. He is more similar to Mussolini, for instance. Hitler and Mussolini have different brands of fascism. The version of fascism the U.S. is sliding towards is more similar to Italian than German, although there are similarities to the U.S. now in the Weimar Republic, because history never precisely repeats itself. Mark Twain said history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So it's not exactly, there's not a one-to-one parallel to previous fascist regimes, but it is a brand of fascism the U.S. is slowly sliding into. And it's just going to keep getting worse. The U.S. would like to start a war with China. It is currently prosecuting a war in Ukraine. It is bombing Yemen and starting another war there. This is endless war, endless suffering, endless exploitation of the third world, and this isn't the worst it will get. So if you're a person of any consciousness, resist. Wake up. Fight back. I mean like legal battles. I don't mean violence. I mean get out and protest. I mean sue, I mean throw a wrench in a system, civil disobedience, whatever you can do, resist this system, because it is going to get worse. It is unjust. It is evil. It's not just me, and it's not just the 65 million people worldwide with long COVID and growing. 65 million is like 3 years out of date at this point. The number has grown. There just hasn't been an effort to collect fresh statistics. It's probably 74, 85 million, because people keep getting infected with coronavirus. There are new cases of long COVID every week, every day, thousands and thousands more, because it was 1.5% of unvaccinated individuals. It's like 0.75% of vaccinated individuals get long COVID on a first infection. A second infection, it might be like a 1% chance or 1.5% chance. It just goes up each time. You're getting towards people who've been infected like 10 times. When they get their 11th infection, that's a really high risk of long COVID at that point, even if they've been vaccinated. It's not just the people with long COVID. It's not just the people with, say, HIV. It's not the people who develop MS, say, fresh out of grad school and aren't eligible for SSDI because they didn't have the work credits, because the way that worked out. It's not just the people who are racial minorities or ethnic minorities. It's not just transgender. There are countless people suffering under the system. And this is capitalism. I know there is a meme. Some people blame capitalism for everything. No, capitalism is the thread that ties these things all together. Just because you refuse to see it doesn't mean it isn't true. If you don't believe it's true, dig deeper or ask people who are aware that it's true, who are telling you it's true. They will explain how these things are tied together, because you have to dig. It's not superficially obvious. It's not immediately apparent, but it is the case. So resist and wake up. I wish you folks all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. Let me be clear. Obey the law as you resist. And may you always find Guiding Star to lead you home. Until next time, this is Northstar. Adieu.